13 Roads. Here is a tale I have not yet forgotten. Harrow's well fed his farm a thing with no name. 1 bucket at a time, for a year, until there was no farm left, and no family, and nothing on that ground but grey dust and the well. It had fallen out of the night sky. I will tell you what I can of it, which is little, because it was a colour, and it was not a colour anyone has a word for, not on the drowned road, not anywhere I have walked. It went down the well, and the well water carried it up, bucket by bucket, into the soil and the fruit and the cattle, and at last into Harrow's wife and Harrow's 2 children. Everything it touched swelled and brightened, and then went grey, and then crumbled to a dust you could pass your hand straight through. Harrow watched it take every one of them, and Harrow did not leave. I am going to tell you why a man does not leave, and what is still down that well today, patient, waiting for the next bucket to come up. The drowned road is the road of wells. It runs through low green country, estuary country, ground that holds water the way a cloth holds it. And the people who farm along it do not dig for water so much as ask the ground to stop hiding it. Every farm on the drowned road has its well. The well is the heart of the place. The well is the first thing dug and the last thing abandoned. And the people of that road have a saying about it that the children learn before they learn their letters. You do not know what you are drinking. You only know who drew it. It is a road of pacts, the drowned road. Things were promised far back to the water, by sailors, by river priests, by the drowned themselves. And the water on that road has a long memory and an open account. And now and then it sends something up the well rope to settle a part of it. The boundary people know this. They draw their water in the morning in the light, and they speak a small word over the bucket, and they do not ever lower a lamp and look down. Harrow's farm was the best farm on that road, and Harrow's well was the best well on the farm, and for 3 generations the Harrows had drawn from it in the morning, in the light, and said the word, and prospered. Sweet water, the sweetest on the road. People walked a long way to fill a flask at the Harrow well, and Harrow let them, because his father had let them, because a good well is a kind of wealth that costs nothing to share. That is the farm I want you to see before the rest of this. A green, well-kept, generous place. A stone house with a deep roof. A man who had been handed the best land on a hard road and had not wasted it. A wife he had chosen well, and 2 children who had been born in the deep-roofed house and knew no other sky. It was, by every measure the drowned road has, a blessed place. I want you to hold that. The tale only weighs what it should weigh if you hold, the whole way down, how much there was to lose. It fell on a night in early spring, and Harrow saw it fall. He was the only one awake. A farmer in spring is the last one to bed and the first one up. And he was standing in his own yard near midnight, when the sky, off to the east, quietly tore. That is the word he used after, the one time I am told he spoke of it plainly. Not flashed, not flared, tore, as though the night were a cloth, and something on the far side of it had pushed a finger through. And down the tear came a light, falling, and the light was a colour. Harrow was a grown man of 40 years, and he had seen every colour the drowned road owns. Every green of the wet country, every grey of its skies, the estuary's blues, the drowned blue of deep water at dusk. This was none of them. This was not a new shade of a colour he knew. It was a colour that stood outside the whole arrangement, a colour that the eye received and the mind then refused, the way the mind refuses a word in a language it has decided it does not speak. He could not afterwards say whether it had been bright or dark. He could only say that it had been wrong, and that looking at it had felt like hearing your own name called by someone who could not possibly know it. It came down fast and unhurried at once. It cleared the far hedge. It crossed his east field low, and it did not strike the ground. It went into the well. Down the open mouth of the Harrow well, clean like a coin into a slot, like a thing that had crossed the whole black gulf of the sky to arrive at exactly that small ring of stone. And the well, for one moment, lit from within, that wrong colour standing up out of the ground in a column to the height of a man. And then the light was gone, and the yard was dark, and the only sound on the whole farm was the well water settling, slap and slap, against the stone. Harrow stood in his yard a long time. I have wondered what he thought in that hour, and I think the truth is the saddest version. I think he was afraid. A man does not watch the sky tear without being afraid, but I think the fear in Harrow had nowhere useful to go, because the thing had gone into his well. Not his field which he could fence, not his barn which he could burn, his well, the heart of the place, the thing his grandfather dug and his father kept and his children drank from every day of their small lives. A man can fight a thing in his field. A man cannot fight the heart of his own home. He can only watch it and hope and keep drawing the water, because the alternative to drawing the water is to have no water. And a farm with no water is not a farm. It is just a man standing on ground he used to own. So Harrow did the thing that doomed all of them, and he did it for the most ordinary reason there is. In the morning, in the light, he walked to the well, and he looked down it, and the water looked like water, dark and far and ordinary, his own face small on it. And he lowered the bucket, and he drew it up, and he carried it inside, because his family had to drink, and breakfast had to be made, and the day had to begin. He said the small word over the bucket. He had always said it. It had never before been a word that mattered. It mattered now, and it was not enough, and nothing that small was ever going to be. For a while, and this is the cruelty built into the thing, the same cruelty the quiet road builds into a voice and the bone road builds into a debt. For a while, nothing was wrong. For a while, it was even better than well. The spring that followed the falling was the finest spring the Harrow farm had ever had. The east field, the one the light had crossed, came up first and came up extravagant. The grass stood higher than a child by the end of the month. The fruit trees, when they flowered so heavily the branches had to be roped. Harrow's wife stood at the kitchen window and laughed at it, at the sheer green showing off of the place. And Harrow laughed with her and let himself believe, the way a frightened man will grab any rope lowered to him, that whatever had come down the sky had been a blessing after all. A strange one, but the drowned road dealt in strange, and not all of it strange was cruel, and the field was so very green. The children played in the long grass of the east field all that spring. I want you to know that, and I want you to forgive me for telling you, because it is going to matter, and it is going to hurt. They were out in it every day, the boy and the girl, brown-legged and shouting, lost to the shoulders in grass that the well water had raised. And every evening they came in and drank a cup of the sweet Harrow water and went to bed in the deep-roofed house and slept. The fruit came ripe early. It came ripe enormous. Harrow's wife took the first pear of the year off the roped branch, a pear the size of 2 fists, flawless, glowing with ripeness, and she cut it at the kitchen table to share among the 4 of them. It was grey inside. Not rotten. Harrow knew rot. Every farmer knows rot. Rot has a smell and a softness and a long, honest history. This had none of that. The pear was perfect to the eye and perfect to the touch, and grey all through the centre. A dry, fine, even grey. And it gave off no smell at all, and when Harrow's wife touched the grey with the tip of one finger, it was not soft, and it was not firm. It was brittle. It crumbled. A whole, ripe pear, and the heart of it came apart into dust on the kitchen table, and the four of them stood and looked at it. And outside the window, the impossible green field went on showing off in the last of the light. They tried every pear on the tree. They tried the apples when the apples came, and the plums, and the soft fruit. Every one of them was the same, flawless, enormous, glowing with a ripeness that should have been a year's good fortune, and grey and brittle and scentless at the core. Harrow took a spade to the east field at last and turned up a row of his early roots, and the roots came out of the ground huge and clean and beautifully formed and grey inside, all of them, that same fine, even ash. The field had not failed. I want to be exact about this, because the exactness is the horror. A failed field a farmer can understand. A failed field is a grief he has a shape for. Harrow's field had not failed. Harrow's field was succeeding magnificently at growing something that wore the shape of food and was not food. The well water went down into the soil, and the soil did with it what soil does, and what came up was a perfect lie. The land had not turned against him. The land was doing its work beautifully. It had only been handed the wrong thing to work with, and it did not know, the way land never knows, the difference. So they could not eat what the farm grew. That, in itself, a strong farm can survive one season, and Harrow told his family so at the table in the steady voice a man keeps for exactly these moments. They had stores, they had money. They would buy their food this year and let the strange green field burn itself out, and next spring the well would run sweet again, and the trouble would be a story they told. He believed it when he said it. That is the last time in this tale I can tell you Harrow believed something and was only wrong, and not yet doomed. After that night, the believing and the doom are the same thing. Because the water was the food. He had not let himself follow the thought all the way down, and I do not blame him, because the bottom of that thought is not a place a father can afford to stand. They were not eating the grey fruit, but they were drinking the water. They had always drunk the water. You cannot run a house without water. You drink it, you cook in it, you wash in it. The children come in from the long grass, red-faced and gulping it, and every cup of it, all that spring and into the summer, came up the Harrow well on the end of a rope, dark and ordinary looking, with a man's small face on it. And it was sweet. That was the thing that kept the rope going down. The water never, the whole way through this, stopped being sweet. If it had soured, if it had stunk, if it had run brown, Harrow would have walked off that farm inside the hour, and his children would be grown and grey-haired somewhere today. The thing in the well was not crude. The thing in the well kept the water sweet, kept it clear, kept it cool, kept it tasting like the best water on the drowned road, right up until the morning there was no one left at the farm to draw it. It understood, in whatever way it understood anything, that the sweetness was the rope, and that as long as the rope went down, it would be fed. The animals went next, and the animals went faster than the fruit, because the animals drank more. Harrow had a good herd, slow, heavy, contented, drowned road cattle, and that summer they began, one by one, to be wrong. Not sick. Harrow knew sick the way he knew rot, and this was not sick. The cattle grew the way the field had grown, too much and too fast, and then they stopped lying down, and then they stopped lowing. And a man who has kept cattle all his life will tell you that a silent herd is a more frightening thing than a screaming one. They stood in the east pasture, in the long, impossible grass, very still, faced. Harrow noticed this and wished he had not, faced all the same way, toward the well. And at night, that summer, if Harrow walked out to the pasture fence, he could see that the cattle were very faintly the wrong color. Not all over, in patches. A wrongness moving slow under the hide, the way light moves under pond ice. And it was the color of the thing that had come down the sky, and there is no word for it, and I will not keep pretending I can hand it to you. It was in the cattle. It was, by then, in the grass. It was in the long, green grass the children had played in since the snow went.
He stopped the children playing in the field. Of course he did. He was not a fool, and he was not careless. And I will not have this tale told as though he was. The moment Harrow understood the field, he called the children in off it and shut the gate and forbade it. And the boy cried about it, because he was small and the grass was tall, and the world had not yet taught him that a father who takes away a wonderful thing is sometimes the only wall between you and something worse. But the children had been drinking the water since the snow went. The field was a gate Harrow could shut. The well was the gate he could not, because the well was the only water there was. His wife was the first of the four of them to change, and she changed the way the fruit had, beautifully, at the surface, and then not. It began as a kind of brightness. In the early summer, Harrow's wife became, for a few weeks, almost unbearably vivid, quick and laughing, and full of a strange high energy, awake before him and asleep after him, talking. She talked more than she had in 20 years of marriage. She talked to the children and to Harrow, and he caught her at it twice and made himself not understand it the first time. She talked, low and pleasant and conversational, to the yard when the yard was empty, to the air near the well. And then the brightness thinned, the way a coat of paint thins, and what was under it began to show through, and what was under it was grey. She grew tired in a way that sleep did not touch. She grew quiet again, quieter than her old quiet, a hollow quiet. Her hair at the temples lost not its colour but its— Harrow had no word, and neither do I— its conviction. It went papery. She would stand at the kitchen window where she had laughed at the green field, and she would look out at it for an hour, not moving. And when Harrow took her gently by the shoulders and turned her and asked her, with the fear plain in his voice now, what she saw out there, she said, "The colour. He's showing me the colour. It's so patient with me, Harrow. It's the only thing that's ever had the patience to show me the whole of itself." And Harrow understood, with his hands still on his wife's papery shoulders, that the thing down the well was not poisoning his family. Poison is a crude word, and the well had never once been crude. It was drinking them, slowly, sweetly, with great patience, the way they had been drinking it. And it had started, as the polite always start, with the one who had talked to it. I have to step into my own tale now, traveller, because I was on the drowned road that summer, and I passed the Harrow gate, and I have never been able to leave that part out and be honest. I was guiding that season, a quiet woman, a widow, who had business at a shrine 3 days down the drowned road, and the good sense not to walk a road of wells alone. We came up on the Harrow farm a little after noon on a hot day, and I knew it before I read the gatepost, because every guide on that road knew the Harrow well, the sweet well, the generous one. A guide remembers water the way other men remember inns. And the farm, that noon, was the most beautiful thing on the drowned road. I want you to understand that I did not walk up to an obvious horror and feel a wise chill. I walked up to a green and golden farm at the height of a glorious summer, a field of grass like a held breath, fruit trees roped under their own impossible weight, and a broad, calm man at the gate with his sleeves rolled, lifting a hand to two travellers the way his father must have taught him to. And every ordinary sense I owned told me I was looking at the one lucky place on a hard road. It was the other sense that stopped me, the one the salt black left me when it sent me back, the sense that does not see or hear, the one that only ever tells me a single flat thing: this is wrong, this is wrong. Leave. It had been quiet for weeks. At the Harrow gate it woke, and it did not whisper.
It stood up in me, and it would not stop.
Harrow welcomed us. Of course he did. He was, even then, even with the thing already standing up, his wife's voice, a genuinely generous man. And a generous man whose neighbors have lately stopped visiting is a lonely one. And he was glad, plainly, warmly glad, of two faces at his gate. And he did the thing the drowned road built this whole tale to turn on. He offered us water, the famous water, the sweetest on the road. He went himself, smiling, to the well, and he drew a bucket, and he carried it to us across the yard in the sun, and he dipped a cup, and he held it out. And the widow I was guiding, hot from the road, reached for it. I have a hand that is faster than the rest of me. I have told you that, on another night, about another road. I put it between the cup and the woman. I did not knock the cup down. You do not, in a man's own yard, strike the kindness out of his hand. There are prices for that a guide cannot pay. I simply caught her wrist and held it, and looked at Harrow, and said the only thing the moment left me room to say. I said we had taken a vow for the road, a water vow, a pilgrim's discipline. We drank only what we carried until the shrine. It was a lie. It was a good lie, a kind one, shaped to let a generous man keep his pride. And Harrow, God forgive me, Harrow nodded, and looked a little wistful, and tipped the cup out onto his own dry yard, and the grass where it fell was very, very green. We walked on. The widow was cross with me for an hour, and then forgot it. And I looked back once. A guide always looks back once. And I saw the green farm, and the roped trees, and the small stone ring of the well, and the broad man standing alone in his yard, watching two more visitors leave. And the wrong sense in me was still standing up and screaming, and I walked on anyway. Because what could I have done, traveler? Tell me, because I have asked it of every fire since. I had a feeling. I had no proof. I had a widow with a shrine to reach, and a vow of my own, older than any water vow, that a guide guides the souls who hire him, and does not get to also empty every doomed farmhouse he passes on a hunch. You cannot drag a man off the best land on the road because the air at his gate feels wrong. He would not have come. No one ever comes. I have learned on 13 roads that you cannot save the people who do not yet know they are drowning. You can only refuse the cup and remember the farm and carry it out. So that is what I did. I refused the cup. I remembered the farm. And here it is, carried out, set down at your fire, which is the whole of what a guide who arrives too early has ever been able to do. That was the summer the drowned road told Harrow to leave. It did not tell him in a voice. Roads do not. It told him the way a road tells you anything, through the people on it. The neighbors stopped coming for water first. Word moves on a road faster than anything that walks it, and the Harrow well, the generous well, the sweetest water on the drowned road, stood unvisited. Then the neighbors stopped passing the gate at all, and then, because they were not bad people, only frightened ones, 2 of them came, once, and stood at the gate, not inside it, and called Harrow down to them. They told him to go. They told him plainly, and not unkindly. Take the woman, take the children, take what you can carry, and walk. Walk now. The land can be left. The land is just land. And here, traveler, is the center of the tale, and the question I carry it out of that country to set down in front of you. Because Harrow did not go. Harrow had a wife who could not safely be moved, and would not willingly be moved, who stood at windows now and called the wrongness he. Harrow had 2 children he was not going to march out onto a road of pacts and drowned things with night coming. Harrow had 3 generations of his blood in that ground, and a house his grandfather's hands had roofed.
And Harrow had, still, under everything, the farmer's first and final and most reasonable belief, that you do not abandon a living thing because it is taken sick. You stay, you tend it, you sit up with it through the bad nights. That is what the word home has always at bottom meant. The thing you do not leave when leaving is the sensible thing.
He sent the neighbors away. He thanked them, and he sent them away. And he went back up to the deep-roofed house where his family was, and he drew the water, because they had to drink. And he said the small word over the bucket. I have asked myself every time I have walked the grey place where that farm was, whether Harrow was a fool that day. I have never been able to make the word fit him. He was not a fool. He was something the drowned road is crueler to than it has ever been to a fool. He was faithful. After that, the year went dark, and it went dark quickly, the way the back half of any year does. The cattle by autumn would not stand. They lay in the pasture in the grey grass, breathing, faintly luminous in patches in the dark, and Harrow could not bring himself to put them down, and could not bring himself to go near them, and so they simply lay there, being slowly drunk, a field of them. And that is a thing Harrow had to see from his windows every day, and I will let you carry the weight of it without my adding to it. His wife stopped coming downstairs. She went up into the deep roof, into the small room under the beams, and she did not exactly refuse to come down, so much as she stopped being able to remember that down was a place that wanted her. Harrow carried her meals up, the bought food, never the farm's, and she ate less of it each day. And each day there was a little less of her, not thinner exactly, fainter, as though she were an inked word, and someone, patiently, was working her back to blank paper. And at night, now, the well was not dark. Harrow would stand in the yard. He had taken to standing in the yard at night. A man cannot always be in the house with what was in the house. And the mouth of the well gave off, very low, very steady, a light. That light, the color with no name, lying just under the water now, the way the wrongness lay just under the cattle's hide, and pulsing, slow, patient, fed. And Harrow understood that he was looking at the heart of the thing, that it had come the whole length of the falling sky to sit in his grandfather's well and grow strong on his family, and that it was, by autumn, no longer hiding how strong it had grown. The children were the last sweet water left in that house, and the light in the well was getting brighter. I am going to tell the next part plainly and without dwelling, because it does not need dwelling, and because the children deserve to be carried through this tale gently, even now, even here. The boy went the way his mother had gone, only quicker, because he was smaller and there was less of him to drink. The brightness first, a week, no more, of a strange, shining cleverness. The boy suddenly able to sit still, the boy suddenly full of long, quiet thoughts that no child his age has any business carrying. And then the fading, the papery quiet, the standing at windows. Near the end, he asked Harrow once, in the reasonable voice the thing seemed to leave them as it took the rest, whether the color was lonely, out there between the stars, before it found their well. He asked it the way a child asks whether the moon is cold. Harrow did not have an answer. There is not an answer. The boy did not seem to need one. He had only been, I think, passing along something he had been shown. The girl was older, and the older a thing is, the longer it takes the well to drink it. And so the girl was last of the children. And the girl was the one who was still herself enough, near the end, to be afraid. That is the cruelty the drowned road saved for Harrow. His wife had gone calling the thing he, content. His son had gone curious. His daughter went knowing exactly what was happening to her and frightened of it, and turning to her father for the one thing a father is for, which is to make the frightening things stop. And Harrow could not make it stop. He could only sit with her. He could only do for his daughter what I once watched a guide do for an old man on another road. Hold on and stay close,
and refused to let her be alone inside it. And that is not nothing, traveler. I want to be clear that it is not nothing. But it is not what a father is for. A father is for fixing it. And the well had taken, long before it took the girl, Harrow's ability to fix anything at all. She faded in the deep-roofed room, near her mother, through the last cold weeks of that autumn. And then the house was only Harrow. You would think, I thought, the first time the drowned road told me this tale, you would think that was the moment he would finally leave. The reasons to stay were gone. That is the plain arithmetic of it. His wife was a faint shape under the beams that no longer answered to her name. His children were, I will say it the way the farm said it, his children were a fine grey dust, in 2 beds, in a shut room. And Harrow had not been able to make himself do anything with that dust. Because there is no thing to do. The drowned road does not leave you the dignity of a grave when it has drunk the someone out of the bones. There was nothing left on that farm to be faithful to. Every reason Harrow had given the neighbors at the gate was spent. And still Harrow did not leave. And I have had to think hard, traveler, about why. Because I will not hand you a man I do not understand, and for a long time I did not understand this. Here is what I have come to. By that last winter, Harrow staying was no longer faithfulness. Faithfulness needs a living thing to point at, and Harrow had none. What kept Harrow and the grey farm through that last winter was something quieter and harder to look at. It was that the well had drunk his family, and the well was the last place his family still, in any sense, was. Every cup they had ever drunk had come from it and gone into them and been drunk back out, and the whole of the 4 of them was down that shaft now, mixed into the patient, nameless colour. And a man who has lost everyone does not, it turns out, walk away from the last place that still contains them, even if the place is a horror, even if the place is the horror that did it. Harrow did not stay on that farm to keep his family. Harrow stayed because the well was where his family had gone, and he was not, he found, when it came to it, he was not able to be a man who lived somewhere else than where his family was. So he stayed the winter, alone, on grey ground, in a deep-roofed house, drawing water from a well that glowed. He still drew the water. I want you to understand that, because it is the last and worst thing I have to tell you about Harrow, and it is the thing the grey place taught me and sent me out to teach you. He had bought food enough. He did not, that winter, need the well. He could have drawn from the rain butt, the runoff, the half-frozen edge of the estuary a mile off. There were other waters, hard ones, mean ones, but other waters. Harrow did not go to them. Every morning of that last winter, Harrow walked out across his grey and silent yard, past the pasture where the cattle had long since gone to dust in the dead grass, to the mouth of the glowing well, and he lowered the bucket, and he drew it up, and the water came up sweet. And he drank it. He drank it knowing. That is what sets Harrow apart from his wife, who drank it talking, and his son, who drank it curious, and his daughter, who drank it afraid. Harrow drank it knowing. Knowing exactly what was in it, knowing exactly what it had done and what it would do, knowing the water was the thing and the thing was the water. He drank it because it was sweet, and because it was the last thing his family had touched, and because, I think this is the truth, and I think it is the most human and most terrible thing in this whole tale, because somewhere in that last grey winter, Harrow had stopped wanting to be a man the well had not drunk. The well had his wife. The well had his children. To refuse the well now would have been to choose to remain, alone and grey-haired and unaccompanied, on the wrong side of it. He did not want to be saved. He wanted to go where they had gone. And the well, which had been patient with all of them, was patient with him too, and let him take the long, sweet way down, one morning, bucket at a time. It ended on a night in early spring, almost to the week, a year from the night the sky had torn. I was not there. You know by now that I am honest with you about what I did not see. But the next farm along the drowned road saw it, every soul on it, because it lit their windows from a mile off, and what they saw is what I carry. They saw the color come home. It came up out of the Harrow well in a column, the way it had gone down, but vast now, fed, a year of a green farm and a good herd and a faithful family burning in it, a standing pillar of that hueless, wrong light, roaring up out of the small stone ring and into the spring dark, and the low country for a mile around lay under a color that no one on it had a word for, and every one of them looked away from, because the eye would not keep it. It stood up off the Harrow farm and into the sky. It found the place where, a year before, the night had torn, and it went back through. It went home, up the long, falling road it had come down, back out into the gulf it had crossed to find one sweet well on one wet road in all the turning world. And the people of the next farm, when they could make their eyes work again, looked at the Harrow place in the new dark and saw nothing there at all. No house light, no well light, nothing. In the morning they did not go and look. It was a full week before anyone went and looked, and it was, in the end, the way it is in all these tales, that no one quite chose to go. They only, one grey afternoon, found that their feet had carried them up the Harrow lane to the gate. This is what they found, and it is what is there today, because I have stood at that gate myself, and I am telling you what is there today. A grey place, perhaps 4 fields wide. Inside it, nothing. And I mean the hard, complete nothing the drowned road only makes here. No grass, no weed, not the green skin that comes back over every other kind of ruin in a season or two. Fine grey dust, even, over everything, ankle deep, and under the dust, the shapes of things. A deep-roofed house gone down at the knees, a barn, a fence line, all of it the soft grey of the inside of that first pair, all of it waiting to crumble at a touch, and most of it already crumbled. The neighbours call it the drunk acre. The boundary children are taught it the way boundary children are taught the rule of every road. You do not go in, you do not walk the grey, and you do not, whatever you do not go to the well. Because the well is still there. In the middle of the grey, the one thing on that whole farm that did not go down at the knees. A small ring of clean stone, upright, untouched, the way the heart of a thing is always the last part of it to fall. And the colour did not all go home. They never do, traveller. That is the lesson under the lesson, the one the drowned road most wants carried out. A thing that has been somewhere for a year, fed that well and grown that strong. When it leaves the way a guest leaves a house he intends to come back to. It leaves something of itself behind, down at the bottom, in the dark, in the water. Small now, patient now, faint as a candle behind a far door, but there. And the well, traveller, the well still gives sweet water. I have stood at that gate, as I have told you. I have looked down the grey lane at the one clean ring of stone standing in the dust where a family used to drink. And I will tell you what I felt, because it is the toll of this tale, and I have walked a long way to set it in front of your fire. I did not feel afraid, standing there. I felt thirsty. The drowned road made very sure that I felt thirsty, that I stood at the gate of the worst thing I have ever guided a soul past, and found, rising in me, quiet and reasonable and entirely my own, the small, ordinary wish to walk up the grey lane and lower a bucket and taste, just taste, the sweetest water on the road. That is how it works. That is the whole of how it works, And it is why Harrow could not save himself, and his wife could not, and not one of those children could. The thing in the well never has to chase you, and never has to lie to you. It only has to be sweet and patient, and wait at the bottom of the one thing you cannot run a life without, and let you, in your own time, in your own thirst, for your own good, ordinary reasons, lower the rope. You have a well. Everyone does. Some quiet, deep, sweet-watered thing at the center of your life that you draw from every single day without once lowering a lamp to look at what is in it. A habit, a love, a comfort, a grief you have made a home of. You do not know what you are drinking, traveler. You only know that it is sweet, and that it is yours, and that the rope has always gone down and always come back, and that nothing has ever yet come up it but the water. Nothing yet. Look down. While the looking is still yours to do, lower the lamp once and look down. My fire is grey to its embers, and I have the grey acre to walk past again before the light, and I would rather pass it walking than sitting still, so I will leave you here. Sleep. Drink if you are thirsty. You have to drink. We, all of us, always have to drink. But say the small word over the cup. It will not be enough. Nothing that small is ever enough. Say it anyway, and know what you are drinking, and know who drew it, and know that the rope goes down into the dark in both directions.